we realize that we have lived this life without that love of that expectation that we set. And this acknowledgement supports all of our lives. And it's an unconscious disappointment that lingers from failure to receive these necessary elements of our life slowly, that evolves into a sense of emptiness. So, for example, when we're born with the expectation that we're gonna have like a loving community. Like I remember as a child, like I just thought that the world was just so beautiful. Like it was just like think about it. You had no worry in the world, and then as you grow up, you realize your mindset changes because of your experiences, right? But you set this expectation, like I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and sometimes we don't fulfill them, or sometimes we even just think it or we record it like subconsciously, that we didn't realize that we set that expectation for ourselves. And when we set expectations for ourselves and sometimes for other people and they're not fulfilled, we also grieve that. We grieve that, like, I could say, oh, my husband is gonna come into my life and we're gonna have this big fairy tale life. And even though we have a beautiful life, it wasn't for him coming saving me from the tower. It wasn't, it wasn't what I created as a child because I haven't experienced like reality, right? But there's so many different ways of unconscious like expectations that we've set. And when we set those expectations and they're not fulfilled, we grieve that version of ourselves as well. And this takes me into the fifth gate of grief is ancestral grief. So this is grief that we carry in our bodies from sorrows that we experience from our ancestors. So at the fifth gate, we acknowledge the grief of our ancestors and the way that we've taken on their suffering. And ancestors are, people that have passed away, the people in our lineage, but also think about the grief that has been passed on from your parents. Um, we also carry, and this is a sense, our indigenous culture, like our roots, we carry that grief of colonized, like people coming and colonizing our lives. And that's also another form of ancestral grief that we carry. It's deep and it's engraved in us, but also we need to address that it's there. And this gate, it allows us to understand the awareness of where our roots come from and what we're mourning for our ancestors that we don't realize that is there as well. Um, when we deny and compress our grief, it will generate like a lot of rage within us. And we can see it in our world today with all of the crime or all of the hurt. There's like a lot of unprocessed grief that people are denying themselves of experiencing or feeling. And when we face that that darkness or those wounds, it is our key to freedom. And until we face it, we are driven by patterns of avoidance, of avoiding those problems. We don't want to look at it, we don't want to see it, we don't feel it, we want to deny it. So one of those, something that comes up is anger. We then become angry, and when we become angry, or into a way where we start becoming resentful, it pushes us away from our own selves, like to see that beautiful expression of who we are, and we keep ourselves surface, like we are not able to dive deep. I'm a firm believer that people can only go deep with you as deep as they go with themselves. And we begin to, if we carry that anger, we then lose a degree of ourselves, like our souls. And we begin to lean, like because we carry that, we then begin to lean on power. We have power trips. We then become we focus our happiness on wealth, like money, and where we're our status, like how higher we are than others, or the privileges in our lives, and it becomes a secondary satisfaction. And that's what we revolve our life around, is materialistic things. We find a way to avoid it and find another way to like influence our lives, but it's not who you really are because you're just covering it up with money, success, power. And when I say success, it doesn't mean like success as there people are successful when they live from their hearts. It's what is driving your success, is understanding that. And wanting to know that if we're focusing on those things, we're always going to want more. We're never going to be satisfied. We're always going to want a bigger car, a bigger house, um, maybe not a bigger car. Cars can always go get so big, but a newer car, a new phone. We think that that's gonna fulfill us, or oh, I'm above her, or I'm above him, or we seek power and money, and that only goes so far. Like you're 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 always gonna feel hungry, and you're always gonna feel that you have to avoid. You're always gonna feel that emptiness, and when we compress our grief, we forget. And there's two ways that we can respond. There's amnesia and there's anesthesia. And when we compress and deny our grief, we go numb, and the light of our life fades away. The brighter world fades away, and we begin to lean on that secondary satisfaction. We then turn into entertainment, watching TV all day, or social media is a big one. We get lost in social media, or we become shopping addicts because we want to fulfill that void, or we have addictions, drugs, alcohol. There's so many addictions like that come with that, and eating, like just trying to avoid feeling that, and we it becomes amnesia, and then we become forgetful. Like we forget that part. We try to forget that part of ourselves, and anesthesia, we numb ourselves. But there are many who are depressed, anxious, and lonely in this world that we, as mentioned, we slip into addiction. And work is one of them. Work as well. And we find ourselves moving like without breathing. Like we're just like so like just moving without like I've have felt that feeling where I feel like I wake up and there's a bag of rocks on me and I cannot breathe and I cannot move forward, and I'm just like, how do I get past this? Like, and it's hard for us to understand where those feelings are coming from, where that emptiness is coming from, and why it comes crashing at our doors. Like, why do I feel this way? And so there are many seasons in our life where there's going to be ups and downs, and our lives are intense, and they require for us to take time to honor what our soul needs. And when we don't acknowledge what comes up, we forget and become numb. So when we experience grief, acknowledge it, create a space for it, and embrace it, and try not to become lost in it and neglect your soul, your purpose, who you are, your desires, and also a sense of belonging. Um, a lot of people are afraid. That's why they don't want to go there. They don't want to acknowledge or step into their hurt because they're afraid. And when we were children and we fell and like scraped our knees, who did we expect to like come help us? Our mom and dad, right? To pick us up
Yeah.
and be like, well, "You're okay. I love you. Like it's okay." And some people didn't. Not everybody had that. Not everybody had a mom and dad that were like, "It's okay, baby, get up," or "It's okay, get up. Are you okay? Like it's okay to feel that. Let's help you get through it." Instead, it was, "Levántate. You don't need to feel that," or "You made that happen to yourself." Like some
That's
people
what you
didn't.
get for running.
Yeah, that's where you get like just
Like
little.
I deserved it.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's part of where we didn't have a safe lap to climb up on and say you're safe. And we weren't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to cry. I was like, no, you didn't. Or like, that's also something that's engraved in our culture that I think that we really need to work on shifting, is creating that space even for our kids to be vulnerable and cry and feel hurt, like not ignore their feelings and validate their feelings and understand that they're hurt. And I'm working on that with my kids. Like I came from that background where my feelings were not validated. So with my kids, like I find myself bouncing back and forth. Like sometimes I'll be like, stop crying. But then I go in my room after like that conversation. I'm like, I should have validated what they were feeling in that moment. And I work so the next time that happens, it's something that it's a muscle that you grow. Like it's not something that you're gonna change overnight. It's a muscle that you grow as you start learning about yourself and shifting and what you want and what you don't want in your life. You're able to understand what you want to create for your family so that when it shows up, you're able to acknowledge it and not beat yourself up. We're human. We're not perfect. And know that you're working on it. And um when we have so when we fell and hurt our knee, we didn't have a lap to climb up on. So even as adults, when we're hurt, we feel like we have to deal with it ourselves. So we don't reach out to other people. So it's hard for us to reach out to other people because a child, some of us didn't have that support system. So now as an adult, we feel like we don't have it either. Like so we weren't taught how to ask for help, or we don't know what that safety feels like. And so that fear comes in where we're like, no, I'd rather just shove all my problems down and not deal with them. And we quickly learn that fear, once we're able to move through that fear, we are able to create safety within ourselves. It's not necessarily that, yeah, we have a big support system, and that's something that I highly encourage that you bring into your life and not push away, but also learn how to have that safety within yourself by reparenting yourself. So, how going in and understanding your inner child wounds, your teen wounds, and being that parent that you or that support system you wish you had in that moment, and honoring that version because our triggers show up as adults. So one of those examples is because I didn't have a safe space as a child. I didn't know how to accept my husband's love. Like I'm like he loves me and I would push him away all the time. Like I'd push away his love. But it was because as a child I didn't experience the type of love that I wanted, that as an adult I have it and I don't know how to receive it. Like I block myself from it. And so it's understanding that as well, that your triggers as a child or as a teenage years or your adulthood, they show up, and you have to learn how to reparent yourself and create a space for yourself by saying you're safe. You're in a safe space. Your partner is not the person who caused your wound, so allow him to love you. And that's something I've had to learn as well. Like allow him to love me. He is not the person who hurt me in my past relationship. He is not my parents. He is my partner and he's a very good partner. And I'm not allowing him to love me and I'm pushing him away. And I need to recognize that, like when I do that. Because sometimes we react as if we were in that wound as a child. Even though it was so long ago, we subconsciously react that way. It's because that's how we learn to respond. And sometimes our wounds as child can sabotage our happiness and what's in our lives now because we neglect it and we don't want it because we don't know how to accept it. We have to be open to receiving abundance, receiving that type of love, receiving the help, receiving that guidance. Just be open to it. Open to receiving it is also what allows you to fully embrace it as well, embracing that grief that's there. And finding a safe container, that safe space, the woman in your life that could be there for you, the husband that could be there for you, your parents, or just whoever that could be there for you. Create that safety and letting them know what you need. What are your boundaries? Um, and for me, so something that I've been able to do, like there are some boundaries that I needed to set with my siblings, and I was so afraid. Like I was so afraid to even set boundaries with them to a point where, you know, I didn't know how to have those difficult conversations with them. And I was so afraid that if I expressed how I felt to them, they would be like, I don't love you. They'd abandon me or something, which they would never do that. But that was the story I created in my head. So I have two sisters and a little brother, two older sisters, and I was able to have a conversation with each of them and say, hey, this is how you're hurting me. This is how you hurt me. This is a resentment I have that I've carried throughout my lifetime. And they would be like, well, I didn't know that that was like how you felt. I didn't know that that's, and vice versa. They were like, hey, you made me feel this way. And I was able to have that deep vulnerability with each sibling, and we were able to work through it and overcome it. And so now, like if I'm doing something that hurts them, they'll be like, hey, this hurts me. Like we've created that space with one another. And it's so beautiful because we didn't have that relationship before. So to have that right now in our adulthood has been very beautiful. And when I express to them like how I feel, they're so responding. Like they will respond to my like how I feel. They will change it. They will work on it. They don't just like, oh, whatever. They will validate who I am and validate my feelings, and we do that for one another. And like my siblings are my tribe. Like I love them, and sometimes we need boundaries and we need to create space between one another. But just because we do that doesn't mean we have to hate each other. Like we can love each other and be there for one another and move through things together. And I think that's why I honor my siblings so much, because of how they have showed up when I'm vulnerable with them. And same for my husband. Like I say, hey, this I don't like this. This is my boundary. How can we work on this? What can I do? What am I doing? And being able to work with that together and creating those spaces for one another. That's very important. And with my friends too, expressing my needs, it goes back to expressing your needs. What are your needs, and identifying what those are. And um yeah, that brings me into what is it that, like, I want to ask you a question. Like, what gates of grief have you opened in your life? Like looking at the gates and understanding them. What are what are those gates?
I think the first one, it's a big one for me. Everything we love, we will lose. Um, so in middle school, I had a really, really close friend to me. I don't know if you remember, but she passed away in an accident. Um, and I was 14 at the time, and my friend was 13. So it was hard for me. And a couple of months later, I had my quinceañera, and I wouldn't cry or anything. And that's when my mom kind of started worrying, and she took me to a therapist, because I was a 14-year-old that lost her best friend, but I wouldn't cry. So that was kind of weird for my mom. Um, so I started going to therapy, and it was just my mind blocking that I lost my friend. In my head, I would think, I'll be like, oh, she's still here, but she just moved, because that would happen a lot in middle school and in elementary, where I had really close friends, and then they would move. And so that's a big one for me. So that one's a big one for me, because I feel like every time I got a good friend and I would be vulnerable and I would be myself, I wouldn't be the shy Alicia I was at school with everybody. I would lose it, and that was really hard for me. Um, then I went into high school and I met another girl that was really close friends to me too, and I lost her also. She passed away, and in my mind I was just like, why does like God keep doing this to me? Like, the people I love the most, they pass away. So that was really hard on me growing up. And then with this second friend that I lost, I made an amazing relationship with one of her friends that we were just mutual friends. Um, so then we created this friendship when she passed away, because we were both her friends, and I felt like that was like my band-aid, that friendship. And we shared a lot of things together, and I feel like this person, and still is, very important in my life, because we went through so much together, losing a friend. And when she found her partner, that's when we stopped talking. So I'm grieving that relationship really hard, but I've accepted it. The last time I saw her was actually in a funeral, a place where nobody wants to see someone that they don't talk to anymore. So it was really hard for me. I cried, and I remember her telling me that she misses me too. And she told me that the time that we had together, it's always gonna have a part of her heart. And if God wants us to cross paths again and keep being friends, we will. But if God doesn't want that, then maybe that's the best for both of us. Um, Maybe that environment is toxic for me, and I'm accepting maybe not having her in my life because maybe she has toxic people in her life and just vibes. But I've accepted that and it's been hard. Um where like maybe I meet this person and I want to be vulnerable, but then I'm afraid they're just gonna stop talking to me because whatever happens in our lives. So I've been working on trying to be myself with all my friends, my coworkers, they're my friends, and they've shown up for me a lot. My husband's my friend, and he's shown up a lot, and I think that's the one that hits my heart. The friendships.
Yeah, that's so rough. Friendships are, we experience friendships from childhood and we have people that come and go. And I think it's so hard to experience that loss because they're not gone from the earth. They're still here. They're still living their lives. And especially when it's like that impactful, where you were able to create a relationship with someone else based off of your hurt. You guys helped each other get through that most vulnerable, hurtful time in your lives. And so that is something that is very hard. But by you acknowledging that it's there, it's helping you be able to move on and feel it, I believe, like from my perspective. But like,
And I feel like it hurts the most because I'm I'm grieving different. So my friends that passed away, I've grieved that different because I know they're in a better place now. Maybe like in my head, I'm saying they didn't have to go through the pandemic, or what if something else worse would have happened if they were still here. So I grieve that different to this other person that, like you said, they're still living here, they're living their life, and it's kind of, I feel like it hurts a little bit more because we're both here, and I don't know, it just hurts.
but you're acknowledging that and like you're not avoiding it. I feel like that's courageous to do and that's vulnerable for you to even speak about it right here where the world can see, like that's part of being able to help and not deny that self of you and acknowledging that. Like that's huge and that's huge. And it's something that you has shown up in your life over and over again. And so understanding why, but also speaking about it so that it can heal, so your words can heal. I feel like that's very beautiful.
Yeah, but I just think it's crazy how things work because, like I said, that last time that I saw her, that thing that she told me like stuck to me, where she said, the memories we had together, like I'll always have them in my heart, and if God decides us to reunite, we will, and if we don't, well, I know maybe it's best for us. Um.
Yeah. It's like losing a support system
Mhm.
because that's who was there to support you at that time. And losing a support system is really hard. And, but like you said, there may be a reason as to why that's happening. And so being able to acknowledge that and just know that you're still happy, like you're still living your life and being, that's hard. And recognizing that is hard. Don't invalidate that it's not hard. Losing a support system, losing someone, losing multiple people is very hard. And just being able to recognize that that's there and creating that space for yourself is very courageous for you to do.
And I like how we could still live life and be happy, but still grieve at the same time.
Yeah.
And not just let grieve back there.
Yeah.
And just we could live happy and grieve.
Yeah.
Your grief never has to end. You could grieve your whole life and still be happy. And I love that for both of us.
Yeah. Grief has no time limit. Grief is always going to be there, but it's creating and allowing that space in your life for it. Instead of avoiding it, allowing that space for it and be like, yeah, I did lose somebody. I did lose my job, or I did lose this. I did lose a piece of myself. But I'm working to move forward. I'm not staying in it. I'm not stuck in it. Because I felt like there were points in my life where I was stuck in my grief, where I was in denial of my reality. And I found ways to fill the void to finally, until finally last year, I was like, okay, life is very heavy right now. I don't know if I can continue. And there was an opportunity for me to quit my job. I was an HR manager. I was in HR for 7 years, and just step back and be like, how do I want to honor myself and putting myself first? And what did that look like? And so I've been on that, like diving deep within myself and creating a relationship with myself, which wasn't there before. Like when I was grieving my parents and the things that I lost, my childhood, my teenage years, I didn't understand why it was there. And by understanding why my hurt was there and what I was neglecting, what parts I wasn't loving myself in, it helped me really come forward to be in the place that I'm at now. And like I'm my environment is still the same. Nothing has really changed, but my inside has changed. My heart inside me has changed. My perspective has changed. And sometimes it takes that. Like it takes, yeah, environment changes. Well, yeah, one environment change. I'm not in the workforce, right? I'm not working, but I am at home with my family and creating a relationship with myself and what that looks like. And creating a relationship gives me more time to be there with my kids and be there for my husband, but most importantly, be there for myself and putting myself first, because I found myself rescuing a lot of people. Like, oh, you have a problem? Let me help you fix it. And it was because I didn't want to look at what was going on with me, that I always wanted to help people fix their problems. Like, that's a good thing, being to be able to be a support system for people, but with boundaries, respecting your own needs first. And also, if somebody reaches out and they're like, hey, um, I really need you right now, saying, hey, I am doing this right now. I can't be there for you in this moment, but I can call you at this time. That's a boundary. Like, you're respecting your needs. Like, say you're taking a bath and you're in the tub and you're just relaxing, meditating, or doing your thing, your self love ritual or care routine, and your phone rings and it keeps ringing and ringing, and you're just like, what's going on, And so that someone texts you like, hey, I'm having this difficult time, where you say, hey, can I give you, you're not going to get out of the tub
Yeah.
naked and just talk to them, because I feel like you're going against yourself in that moment. You're not honoring your own needs. So just saying, hey, can I call you back in an hour? And then be like, is it emerged? Like, if they're obviously like in a crisis where they're going to hurt themselves, like, yes, be like, but just ask them, hey, are you okay? Like, do you need me to call you right now, or can you wait like 30, 40 minutes until I take care of my needs first? And then just setting those boundaries as well is like, I feel like is really important. But I can definitely resonate with just the emotion of grief coming up. And sometimes there are relationships that we neglect ourselves in, and it's important for us to attract people that honor our needs as well. Just like a husband and wife, you have a friend, you honor her needs, she honors your needs. And having boundaries in place, I believe, is like really important. So when you experience that grief, like of losing your two friends and like losing this friendship that you built that helped you get through those hard times, how, like, not having in that person in your life, how has your environment changed? How have things changed around you, good and bad?
Um well, I now have a husband and I feel like that's my circle. My husband and my kids. I don't really go out with friends because of the same thing, a fear of having a relationship and then losing it. That's my fear. That's why I don't have friends. um but I'm just I feel like sometimes I need to go out of my comfort zone. Like doing this podcast is out of my comfort zone cuz my comfort is my home and my kids, and but I feel like opening up to you and just letting all these people out there hear that it's not, we have to sometimes get out of our comfort zone to move on. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely get out of our comfort zones and allow that, once again, inviting that grief into our life so that we're able to move on. Like, by you recognizing, yeah, this is a part of where I've been hurt. Like, I lost two friends and I lost another friend on my journey, has hurt myself now. Like, it's like a support system is gone, but I want to support another support system in my life. Like, how can I create that? And by you stepping out of your comfort zone and reaching out to people and like being vulnerable enough to create this podcast, yeah, it does. Like, it does create that opportunity for you to build relationships and for you to build your support system. And so, what is one thing that you miss most about yourself in those moments, like when you had those people in your life?
Um, just being myself. Sometimes we're in places where we don't come off as ourselves. Why? Because we're afraid.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the one thing that I miss the most. But then again, I'm at peace because at home I'm myself. And that's all I've ever wanted, because imagine having a home and not having a supportive husband or even my kids, where let's say my daughter goes to school, and I feel like my daughter goes to school so proud of her mom and talks to her friends about me. That means a lot to me because I know she's proud of me and she's not like embarrassed, or you know, I give her that. I want her to, off of me, I want her to be herself as well. And I don't want her to go to school and be shy, because she's not a shy kid. You know, I was, but she's not me. And I love that for her. I love she could go to school and be herself. And I I I'm not myself to with everybody. I still come off really shy, and it takes time for me to be myself with my coworkers, with new friends, with family, even with family that I see every weekend. Sometimes I'm not myself all the time because I'm afraid. But I feel like I have been working on that, and I know that my family and my friends, they're even gonna love me more, maybe, with me being myself. But um I've been trying to get out of my comfort zone and just, if I say something dumb or I'm myself, I know my family's not gonna make fun of me, or just doing this podcast. I know that all my family's supportive and my friends are supportive. They're just like, do your thing, like it was great. Like that means a lot to me. And like even you taking time out of your day to come here and film with me, that means so much to me. And yeah.
What is something that or have you ever thought about like where your shyness comes from? Like why do you feel like you're so afraid to be yourself
Um
in certain situations? Like that is a question that I ask myself, like why were you afraid to be yourself? And it was the shame. The shame that I carried for my teenage years and like for my childhood, and also the environment that I had in like my childhood. So like I was raised in an environment, typical like cultural environment that I had was my dad was like from the rancho, and so he was very like machista. um he was able to evolve because he was here for so many years and our culture is different, but also he had three daughters that and granddaughters that were able to help him see differently, from a different perspective. And so for me, like I wasn't able to express myself as a child so much because like I would make a note. I had to be perfect, right? I had to be perfect, and if I wasn't like it wasn't my authentic self. Perfectionism is not your authentic self. So I didn't know how to be like as a child. I always wanted to express myself, but I would always get shut down. Like, shh, don't act that or don't do that. Why are you acting that way? Like, so I was always shut down, and so I feel like that's where also I was afraid to be who I am, was because as a child I didn't have that environment to express who I was. Like you say your daughter, like she gets to be whoever she wants to be, and you love her for that and you encourage that. But for me, like I'd always get made fun of or something. So by me understanding that my light was dull as a child from a very young age, One, because I was S8 as a child, so, and I never told anybody until literally like I was literally like 4 years ago. I really finally was like, hey, this is what my husband knew, but like to open up to my siblings and like I wish my parents were here so I can tell them. But that also dulled my sparkle as a child, that I was so ashamed. I carried the shame that I stopped being myself. I stopped being that little kid. It wasn't only my parents, it was what I had experienced that took that light away from me. And so that's why I was so afraid to be who I wanted to be, because of that shame that I carried from that, because I felt like it was my fault. And that's nobody ever anybody's fault. No kid asks for that. But in my mind, as children, we're not able to see outside of ourselves. We take everything on as if it's our fault. So that's how I feel like me as an adult, why I was not, or even as a teenage, I looked mean or something, was because I didn't know how to express myself, because my light was taken away from
I was a shy kid because in my house, I never, not that I remember, my parents never came up to me and be like, "Why are you sad?" or "How are you feeling?" And I'm not gonna judge my parents off of that because probably they didn't receive that when they were kids, so they didn't know any better, you know. I feel like that's a big part in the Hispanic culture where maybe we need to be more open up about our feelings and not be like, "Oh no, you're tough, no llores," o "te caíste because you were running," like you said earlier. So I think that's why I was a shy kid, um, because my parents didn't know better. They didn't know how to come up to me and ask me how I was feeling as a kid, or what could have been wrong. You have everything. No tienes biles, no tienes. Just because you're not a grown up and don't have like bills to pay doesn't mean you don't have problems, you know. And in the Hispanic culture, it's like you're a kid. Like kids don't have problems. So yeah.
me. No, definitely, like I understand and I resonate that as well. Yeah, it's our parents weren't taught that. It's part of that ancestral grief. That's where ancestral grief comes in, is what they were taught, and then they're just passing on what they were taught, and they're honestly doing their best. Like I don't hold that against my parents as well, like that they didn't create that environment. I mean, it definitely has affected me, but I'm able to look past that and understand where they came from, to be able to understand why they weren't able to show that in my environment, and understand them and appreciate that they did their best and acknowledge that they did their best, because it is true in our culture that's not acknowledged. Uh, it's not acknowledged to show your children love, to create a space to show emotion,
Mm-hmm.
period. Like it's not something that we do, and so we don't know how to sometimes express that or be ourselves. And I feel like that's part of something that is deeply rooted, and that's where the ancestral grief comes in. That's part of the that's passed on to us, and either we can decide to break it or to continue it. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you and I are in a place where we decided, like, hey, we want to create space for our kids to have, to show emotion, whatever emotion that is: anger, sadness, happiness, joy. We have to show them everything, and we have to show them ourselves. Like, we can't just say be happy. We have to be happy. We can't just say, oh, if you're angry, you can express your anger in a healthy way. You have to show anger in a healthy way. Like, every emotion is valid, and I feel like we are the leaders and we are their role models that they learn from. And so we are here breaking that cycle, and also showing them a healthy way to show their emotions. And not, for me, like, I know that because I didn't have that space, I became explosive. Like, I'm very explosive with my emotions. And so I've recognized that, and I'm working on it to not be so explosive, that when things come up, not to let it boil up until the last straw, but to acknowledge every emotion as they come up, not when it's already too much to handle that where I explode. And so that's something that I've been able to like learn and recognize as well. But yeah, like understanding where that comes from, it helps us understand why we are in the place we are now, and also being able to like shift and grow from that and understand, like, yeah, that's why I'm this way, but I'm going to reparent that inner child. I am now here to show support. I have a support system. I have myself. I honor your feelings. I honor your emotions. And I feel that's like something that helps us move forward is by being able to be our own parent. Be that parent you wish you had. Not necessarily your parents are horrible, but they did the best they could, and we're gonna help reparent that inner child as well, and that child that needed that love or that support or that space. And that's part of why it's important to have that tribe. I feel like I we don't talk about that enough. Like, we need a support system. Support system is beautiful. We're here to lean on one another and those aspects so that we're able to help guide one another through those moments, but also to have that safety within ourselves. Like, I have a support system, but I'm also strong within myself that I can go through this emotion and I don't need to go through it alone. I have myself and I have my support system, and create that inner, like, that emotion. Um, it's like an emotion regulation, but also create like um a a response to how you are going to react. Create a safety net for yourself to be able to, when those emotions come up, to be able to look at them and work on them and understand why they're there and create a space for them instead of be like, whatever, I'm just gonna go be mad. I'm gonna avoid my sadness,
Mhm.
and take it out on everyone else. Um, what have you found that when that emotion of like shyness comes up because of your childhood, and you feel like you're missing a tribe or you feel like you're missing a support system, even though you have one, you feel like you want a different support system? From my understanding, like, is it like woman, like you want like a woman, like a sisterhood or like a womanhood support system, or like what is it that you feel in your life that you need from others during this time to help you be your authentic self?
Um, yeah, woman. I feel like woman, and um, I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, it's a hard one to understand what we need. What is it that we need? Like, I challenge you to create a plan for yourself, like a grief plan or a support system plan, to where, you know, write down how can I plan to take care of myself better and put myself first and honoring my needs and watering myself, because when you water yourself and honor your needs and go through your own experiences and emotions, you create a better version of yourself to show up for other people. And so by creating a plan is like, okay, what type of woman do I want in my circle? What are their interests going to be? What are their hobbies? What is are they do they have a family? Do they don't have a family? How can these women show up for me? And be very intentional with it and attract that into your life. Write it down. What is it that I want? What needs do I need to be filled? And what how can I show up for others? How can they show up for me? Like, sit with yourself and like ask yourself that, because it's a very hard question. Like, I didn't know what my needs were. I had to figure it out. I had to understand myself and, okay, what is it that you do want? Because we feel like when we're overstimulated or when we need that support, we're like, we need support, no, but nobody's here. Well, how do I need support? Ask yourself those questions, and then identify what people you currently have in your life right now that are your support system, and how can they show up for you differently, and how can you show up for them differently, and write those names down. Like, who can I reach out to when I'm going through these hard times? And then also, when I am going through a hard time, what thoughts can I think of? Like, what healthy thoughts can I think of? Like, I am safe, I am loved, I have a support system who loves me, and I love myself. Like, what healthy thoughts can you bring up? Can you shift those bad thoughts, and instead of saying I am alone, I don't have nobody, I'm not alone. I have my husband, I have my siblings, I have these women in my life. Why aren't they showing up for me in this moment? Well, have I reached out to them? Have I told him that I need them? Have I told my husband that I need him? So it's understanding where you're taking accountability, expressing your needs, how what that looks like, but then being able to work within yourself and dive deeper and be like, how can I create a support system within myself? And I feel like creating a support system within yourself will attract the right people in your life. So for me, like, if I'm having a hard time, like, what activities can I do? So meditate, go on a walk. I like to craft, so do craft things. um one of my favorite things is to read a book. So what activities can I do when I'm going through it? So creating a grief plan for yourself, like what can I do when I'm going through a hard time? Who can I reach out to? What are my needs? And what can I do to cope? What things can I do to cope? And then our activities, and then also how can I shift my thoughts? And when it comes to grief, what's really important is self compassion. Like, self compassion is so important throughout any journey, through a healing journey, through where you're at in your life and where you're at in your journey. It's really important to have self compassion and try not to beat yourself up and have shame, because of your life, or because of what you went through. Like, that's really hard, but it's something that we need to learn how to do, is have self compassion, because it is really important to love yourself. In order for you to receive love from others, you have to learn to love yourself. And self compassion allows us to accept grief as a form of love that take that takes when we experience that it takes when we experience loss. So it's acknowledging that they have that relationship with one another, and instead of trying to get over it, like, oh, get over that, or denying it and put it away with our masks, then self compassion reminds us to ease into our own suffering, like ease into it. Like, you don't have to go tomorrow and be like, I'm gonna heal, and I'm gonna look at every single grief I have. Work through it little by little. Allow yourself those places as they come up. They'll come up. As I've been doing the work and working on myself, I'll work on one thing and another thing comes up. But it's not as hard as like it once was. Like,
Mhm.
it comes, the more I do it, the more you build a muscle within yourself to react differently when things show up. And there are so some tips of self-compassion are caring for your body and mind. One thing that I like to do is meditation. Um, that has really helped me, or even just sitting with myself for like 5 minutes, just no phone, no nothing, just sitting there, like just breathing in and out, doing breathing exercises. And for my body, like recently, I've been learning how to cut certain things out of my diet that are going to help me be better. So, like, one of them is gluten. I realize that gluten doesn't react well to my body. So, I've cut gluten out. Haven't ate gluten for about 2 years now. And I'm working on cutting out sugars, more sugars, and also just cutting out like processed foods. And so realizing that that's what's going to make me feel better, and understanding that our guts and our minds are correlated with one another, and it's important to be conscious of what we feed our bodies and what we feed our minds. Um, Also, permission. Give yourself permission to feel it all. Like, give yourself permission to feel. I know that because as a child I didn't have an environment where I could express my emotions, and so I grew up not being able to, or feeling like I couldn't. It's like giving yourself permission. It's okay to feel those emotions. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be happy, as long as you're doing them in healthy ways. So, like, as long as you're not angry and punching the walls, you can be angry and sit in it and be like, okay, why am I angry? And breathe through it. Like, it's okay to feel those emotions and find healthy ways to get through them. And connecting with people. Part of self compassion is connecting with people, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, telling people your needs, reaching out for a community, seeking that community. It's okay to seek friends, and finding them in healthy places. Um, seek support from others. Like, that's like the number one thing, is the hardest thing. We all want a community to lean on. We all want that support. We all want that love. And um, when we don't feel it, it's very hard. And so just realizing that who you currently have in your life, if you don't have a support system, how can you find one? And creating that relationship with yourself so you can become your own support system as well. Um, and instead of and the way that you talk to yourself is really important during these times. So instead of criticizing yourself for not handling the sadness better, or handling the grief better, say, remind yourself that you've never faced this particular type of feeling or grief or experience before, and you're doing the best you can. Another way is feeling guilty for in front of others. Feel proud that you're modeling how important it is to feel the feels, and beating yourself up for not feeling better by now. Take time to notice one or two moments of actions that look better and easier than they did last week or last month. That you're doing your best you can and acknowledging that and not beating yourself up. Like you don't have to have it all done in one moment. It takes time to be able to create that space for yourself, and it will start aligning with your healing as you start working on yourself and creating space for yourself and putting yourself first and having boundaries. It starts creating that energy into your life, and it starts smoothing and easing. Things start becoming flowy, not easy, but more flowing and more in alignment with your heart and your soul. And sometimes we criticize ourselves by like telling ourselves we're too lazy, like we're lazy. And so we find like we start cleaning or we start finding things to do to avoid our feelings. But, or even sitting on the couch. Like it's hard for me to sit on the couch because I feel like I'm being lazy. Or even watch a movie, it's hard because I feel like I should be doing other things that are more important. But having compassion and remembering that your body is grieving too and it needs rest. Rest is important. And doing the best that you can to get that rest. Sleeping 8 hours, drinking water, taking breaks, resting your body. Your body is grieving too. Your body is going through a hard time. So creating that time for yourself in that space. And, you know, in comparison, like he, stepping into our healing. Healing is creating that support system within ourselves, and self compassion. We need to be patient with this part of ourselves. Like be patient with yourself as you're going through hard times, and also be aware of the self criticism that you have. And we have this like when you feel like there's a knot in your throat and you can't speak, reach out. That's the moment you should reach out to someone. If you feel like you can't work through it alone, reach out for your support system that you're building, and show up vulnerably and have that courage to express who you are and to be seen. Show up as you are. Show up as who you are, and you'll recognize what are not safe places and what are safe places. But surrounding yourself with the safe people and in the safe environment. And when things don't no longer resonate with you, or if that's not a safe environment for you or your family, setting boundaries or creating space so that you can continue to create that happiness. Like, don't keep putting yourself in that same situation over and over again, or that same environment that's not bringing out your authentic self. And, loss allows us to dive deep within ourselves and move closer to honoring our needs and whatever that is. And honoring your needs is a huge way of honoring yourself and who you are. Um, so yeah, like that's everything that I have. I have a little ritual that we could do
Okay.
to close up.
Yes, I feel like this was a beautiful. Yes, I feel like this was a beautiful episode. Thank you so much for coming on here with me, and I know this is just the beginning. um, the beginning of something big that I've been dreaming about, and I'll be patient. Start healing myself, and maybe we could do another episode talking about. There's just so many topics we could be talking about. Our supportive husbands, our childhood, our motherhood, our single mother stages. Like so many things we could talk about. And I love this for us. Thank you so much. And yeah, you could start your
Yeah,
ritual.
I would love to come back. Come back whenever you'd like me to, and whenever you extend the invitation, we can talk about topics. And I would love to continue to share my journey and my healing and where I'm at and how it's helped me. And so, what this ritual is, rituals are very important in life. They help you connect with yourself. They help you connect with your higher power, whatever that is, and whoever that is. And it just allows you to stay aligned with your purpose. And so since we're talking about grief today, what you're going to do is this is a ritual that we are going to pick. I'm going to pick a stone, and what we're going to do is we're going to put it in the water.
Okay.
And what this is doing is we are putting our hurt and our hurt and our grief into the water, and one of us is going to dump the water into the river so that can wash away our grief, our sorrows that we have and that we carry. This is a good ritual to do when you're working through grief as a way to help work through it and get through it. So you will pick up a rock, a stone, whatever one. You can pick up more than one if you like. and you set intentions, and we're going to put this into the jar. So this is a jar just full of water, and it is what I want to put into the jar, and the intention I want to put into the jar is this goes to everyone who has those dark places and who has those wounds and who has that grief that they don't speak about. And I want them to be able to come forward and feel a safe space and safety for them to come forward and speak. And so I'm putting this for everyone in the world who has those wounds and haven't been able to speak about them.
Um, it's kind of like yours, where all these women, and not just women, like everybody that is afraid to speak out, just to speak out, and to for them to know that they're not alone and their feelings are valid. So all those sad moments and those griefs is what I put into this jar of water, and just so everybody can know they're not alone and their feelings are very much valid.
So this is a representation that our grief and our dark places are one. They're all in one place. And we are together as a collective experiencing grief and experiencing those darknesses, and we're not alone. It all comes together. And we're able to mirror and learn from one another through those experiences. So after this podcast, I will go to the river and I'll dump it off so that we can wash those wounds away. And what happens is the water brings back more nourishment into the into the world. And typically, what you would do is you'd go uh, put this. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna go dump this into a plant so that it can continue to nourish the world. So it'll help the plant grow. But then the stones, I will put them into the river so that it can wash away our sorrows.
Okay,
So that's
yes,
the way that
yes.
it works. But that is a ritual that we have today. But rituals are very important. It helps keep you connected to yourself. And we can talk more about that next time. But thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for coming here. And I think that's going to be it for today. We have a lot more things to talk about in the next one. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, share, and subscribe. And bye.